And they are gathering up at the Mississippi State Capitol, and that's why we have Speaker of the House Philip Gunn in the Element Wealth Studios. Seems like we were just talking about 2022.
Yeah, that's right. Right. Well, good morning. It's great to be with you.
Yes, sir. Good
First
to have
thing
you
I need to do is to personally deliver your Christmas card to you.
Oh.
Yeah, apparently I got the wrong address. It came back to my house. Okay. And so I want to come and in person deliver that card to you.
Well, thank you.
I know your Christmas wasn't complete without getting my Christmas card. So there's a great picture of my family in there, and I hope you'll post that on your refrigerator.
Sure will. I appreciate that.
Spend a little time with your son over the holidays.
That's what I understand. Went hunting.
He came, and your son and my son are friends. He came and hunted with us, and my son killed a deer, and then your son stood there and watched me clean it. So I'm not sure how much help your son was.
I taught him well.
He said, I got to go. So I cleaned the deer.
I got you. Well, good. So good holiday for you and the family, though?
Yes, sir. Always a thrill. I love the holidays. It's my favorite time of the year.
Yeah, me too. I totally agree. But we are back and set to begin a brand new session. You guys will be gaveling in today at noon.
12 noon. Correct? High noon, yes, sir.
High noon. Everybody will be seated. And is that the same on the Senate side?
Yes, sir.
At the same time?
Under the Constitution, you convene the first Tuesday after the first Monday is the way it reads. That always is the first Tuesday, except when the first falls on a Tuesday.
I got you.
When January 1 falls on a Tuesday, then the first Tuesday after the first Monday is January 8.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Wonder what the significance of the Monday following a Monday is.
I don't know, but
travel maybe for the out of town folks.
But they set it up whoever set it up that way. So the first Tuesday after the first Monday.
Gotcha. All right, so you guys are going to be back at it again, and it is an election year, of course. We will be going to the polls in November to elect our state senators and representatives and our statewide offices as well. Seemed like we were just doing this deal.
It comes around regularly, doesn't it?
It sure does.
And in Mississippi, we're fortunate, I think, from a legislative standpoint, to have 4-year terms. Some states, it's 2. And they're running every other year. Yeah, and it's many state legislators every 2 years, just like our Congress. Okay.
Well, so last year, as you and I have discussed, I thought was a very active legislative year. Much was accomplished, certainly, and we can recap that briefly. The teacher pay raise, the medical marijuana bill, tax reform, big-time tax reform, all got through. Those were, I think, high-profile issues. Left is what I have described as unfinished is the citizen initiative, a citizen ballot initiative. We didn't get that done across the finish line. Couldn't get the Senate and the House together on that. So with that as a backdrop, where do we stand? What do you see as the priorities for this session? And before I start that, we're in pretty dang good shape financially. So thanks to you and leadership at the state level for, I think, applying good conservative fiscal principles and policies which have put us in this very good and positive financial condition.
Yeah, and I agree with that, and would like for people to understand that we're probably in the best financial shape we've been in decades. I think that was one of the reasons we were able to weather the COVID pandemic of 2020 so well, because prior to that, we had basically funded the entire budget. We had filled the rainy day fund. We had money in the bank. We had fixed the retirement system. We'd done all these financial needs and still had money in the bank. And so when COVID hit, we were able to weather that financial crisis because we were in such great financial shape. That has continued to today. Yeah. And I do think, looking forward to this coming session, that is going to be one of the top topics of conversation, is what do we do with the surplus? We have a great surplus, and the budget hearings we had last December indicated that we're going to have about $1 billion of recurring revenue moving forward. So right now we have about $4 billion in surplus money. perspective, our budget's about I think we adjusted it to be about $6.5 billion for this coming year. So that gives you some perspective, is that we've got a substantial amount of surplus money. Not all of that's recurring now. About $1 billion of it is recurring.
Well, explain what you mean by that, Mr. Speaker.
Well, it's just
one-time
money.
Okay.
It's just money that we only going to get one time, and we're going to spend it on, hopefully. One of the reasons we're in such great financial shape is that we, conservatives, have made a practice of spending or not spending one-time money on recurring expenses. You spend your savings account to pay your light bill, your water bill, your house note. You're eventually going to run out of money. You're supposed to spend your paycheck to cover. Your paycheck is a recurring source of revenue,
right?
And you use that to pay your recurring bills, and that's the policy, the practice that we have brought to bear over the last 12 years since Republicans have been in control of both chambers of the House. Mm-hmm. And because of that, we've stayed within our means. We've not spent more money than we've got. And that's brought to bear responsible budgeting and responsible financial situation, which we find ourselves in. And so $1 billion of that is going to be recurring. That means we're collecting a lot of revenue from our citizens. This is one of the things you and I talked about last year when we talked about the tax cuts. Mm-hmm. We found ourselves in a situation where we were collecting more money from the taxpayers than we were spending. Now, what's going to happen to that? If the government gets it, they're going to spend it. They're just not going to sit around and accumulate. Mm-hmm. It's too tempting for legislators to just let it sit there. And so that's one of the things that I advocated for, is that we had spent money on everything we could spend money on: the budget, the rainy day fund, the retirement system, the teacher pay raise. We had money in the bank, and we had about $800 million more than we were even spending. And I advocated it's time to give some of that back to the taxpayers. It is time to return. We're collecting more revenue from our citizens than we're even spending. Let's return some of that to the taxpayers. They're better able to provide for themselves, provide for their families, improve their quality of life. And that's what led to us passing the tax bill that we did last year, the largest tax cut in the history of the state of Mississippi. And right. I think our citizens are going to begin to feel the effects of that. As that rolls out and comes into effect, they'll have more money in their pockets. And that's just a good financial decision to be made.
First phase of that goes into effect this year, correct?
Yes, sir.
Which is elimination of the 4% bracket.
That is correct. Mm-hmm. Or the reduction to a 4% flat tax. That's where we're eventually going to get to, is a flat 4% versus a progressive tax.
Phased in.
Phased in, right. Mm-hmm. Now, because of this surplus that we have, I think that's going to be the big topic of conversation over this next session, is how is that to be spent? What are the things that we should spend it on? And does that in some way affect our tax plan? I think at the very minimum, we ought to maybe escalate that plan into 1 year or 2 years. As you know, last year we passed a plan that was phased in over a 4-year period of time.
Right.
Well, with this $1 billion of excess, I think we have the ability to move that, bring it forward, and get it fully implemented sooner rather than later. And I think that's something we ought to be looking at. So
the Lieutenant Governor has indicated support for a one-time rebate in lieu of a permanent reduction further of income taxes or elimination, which was the original goal. Have you guys talked about that? And what is the governor? What is his position?
I don't know what the governor's position is on that. I will tell you there's not been a whole lot of support in the House in my conversations for such a plan.
Okay.
It's almost gimmicky, a 1 year, rebate, 1 year payment in an election year just doesn't. I think it's seen for what it is. What I would say is that if we have the ability to do that, then let's just make it a more permanent tax relief. Let's just make it an ongoing tax relief. If we don't need that $250 million this year, then raises the questions of whether we need it next year and the next and the next. So let's just make it a permanent. Make it a permanent tax reduction.
And that goes back to the recurring versus one-time revenue.
Right.
It's a function of that. Recurring really just referring to our standard sources of revenue.
If we don't need that $250 million, then maybe we can drop the tax rate from 4% to 3.75 or 3.5.
Yeah. All right, we got Speaker of the House Philip Gunn in the Element Well studios. We're stepping aside for a break and coming right back with more about the 2023 legislative session. Back with you in the Element Well studios, Speaker of the House Philip Gunn, our guest. The legislature getting underway in the 2023 session at noon today in accordance with state law. I guess that's provided for in the Constitution, or is that statute?
I think it's in the Constitution.
Makes sense.
And the Constitution also dictates that the Senate convenes at 10 o'clock every day and the House convenes at 2 every day.
Okay.
But that is not hard and fast rule.
Yeah, guys don't follow that.
It just depends on what stage of the session you're in. The beginning stage, first 15 days of the session are reserved unto members to work on their own bills. So for the next couple of weeks, members will be working on their individual bills.
Okay.
Then there's a deadline to drop a bill, and then you have the committee process, and that takes place over about 10 days. And then at the end of that, we have floor action. And when we get to floor action, which will be early to mid-February, we'll start coming in at 9. Both chambers will come in at 9 o'clock in the morning, and we'll work all day till 4 or 5 to clear the calendar. So we have the flexibility to convene when we find it most convenient. But the law says 10 o'clock for the Senate, 2 o'clock for the House.
Okay. So I gather, Mr. Speaker, from our discussion in the prior segment that tax reform is still a high priority for you, and I believe for many members in the House.
Yes, sir. And I think we've been very clear with our message over the last 2 years about that. And I will tell you that we have received national recognition, national attention for our work on reforming our tax structure. Many outfits. I had no idea how many people were watching what we were doing in Mississippi until this summer, when I was able to attend a number of conventions, and I heard from legislators across the state. I was asked to speak on a number of panels, in fact. When they found out I was there, it was like, come tell us what y'all did in Mississippi on the tax cuts. Moving to a flat tax has become incredibly popular. If 5 states did something last year, Iowa, Mississippi, Arizona, 2 others I can't recall right now. Yeah. And it just makes us more attractive on a number of levels. It helps our citizens more. When you reduce their income tax, you let them keep more in their pocket. It lets the citizens provide for themselves better. Yeah. It makes you more attractive to young people. And we've talked about the census and how we've lost population. When you tell a young couple starting out on their career that you can keep more of your hard-earned money in your pocket, it gives them a reason to move to Mississippi. It makes us more attractive to businesses who are looking to place a company somewhere. When their employees can keep more in their pocket, it results in economic prosperity within the community. People have more disposable income. Businesses thrive. They sell more of their goods and services. I mean, you and I have talked many times about the benefits of this, and so I think it's something we have to continue to look at. I think it's something that, given the surplus that we were talking about earlier, you have an opportunity here to do more in that arena. We may not get to a full elimination, but we could certainly either accelerate our plan into 1 year and get there quicker, or we could further reduce the tax rate to something less than 4%. Yeah. Those are all things that we need to be talking about, things we need to be looking at.
Yeah. Good. So I gather then that will be a topic of discussion again.
Absolutely.
Do you expect to see any bills filed?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. We will have bills that will address some of these issues. I will have conversations with our colleagues on the other end of the building, just see how far we can get with that.
Okay. Sounds good. What else is on your agenda, Mr. Speaker, for 23?
One of the things that we've looked about is the post-Roe versus Wade world. As we all know, the Supreme Court overturned that case last June. We in the House have set out to look at a number of things that need to be addressed in that arena. We now have, presumably, more babies will be born since abortion is no longer the case here in Mississippi. As a side note, I would like to commend my House members who led out on that bill. That bill was passed in 2018, House Bill 1510. Little did we know that was going to end up being the very bill that would be used to overturn Roe versus Wade. So I'm proud of the Mississippi House of Representatives, proud of the Republicans in the House who let out in passing that bill. But we have looked at a number of things to address the issues that may arise. We are going to come forward with a bill on adoption, makes it cheaper, more streamlined, more effective. I'm told that for every one baby that is born, there are 36 couples waiting to adopt.
Wow.
So that came from a guy that we consulted with that runs an adoption agency. That means there's plenty of loving families out there waiting to adopt children that are born. So we're going to look at ways that we can make that cheaper and more streamlined. We're looking at our foster care system and ways to make that more efficient and effective. We're going to look at putting a more or increasing the amount of the tax credit that we gave last year to the crisis pregnancy centers. And this is something that's really, really a big deal, and I hope businesses out there that are listening will take advantage of this. This was a $3.5 million tax credit that we passed last year to allow a business who has a tax liability to the state, and rather than giving that tax money to the state of Mississippi, they can give it to a crisis pregnancy center to help them fund their operations. We have contacted, there's 37 crisis pregnancy centers around Mississippi that exist for the purpose of helping mothers who find themselves with an unplanned pregnancy navigate that situation.
Right.
They give them counseling, they give them financial support. They're there for them. I contacted them and asked what their total annual operating budget is, and the number I got was $10 million. So for $10 million, all crisis pregnancy centers around the state could be theoretically funded. So if we raise that tax credit from 3.5 to 10, then theoretically there is a path that the private sector could step up and meet this need without us having to grow government or spend more taxpayer money to create new programs. So that's another thing. Those are just a sampling of some of the things we've looked at that we're going to maybe looking to do in the post-Roe world that we find ourselves in.
Those are good programs. I'm involved with Canopy Children's Solutions on the board there, and they, of course, take advantage of that, and it's a no-brainer, honestly, from a donor perspective.
I tell people this all the time. I use this illustration. You need to embrace the reality you're going to pay this money. This is not a charitable donation. It's not a donation over and above what you're already giving. You owe the money.
Right.
You just get to pick whether you're going to give it to the state of Mississippi or give it to a crisis pregnancy center. But the money's coming out of your pocket.
That's right.
You need to realize that.
Yeah.
Might have twin boys that were little, and we had a problem with them cleaning their room. And so I told them, I said, you need to embrace the reality you're going to clean your room. You either get punished and clean your room, or you can just clean your room. But you're going to clean your room. The same thing here. You're going to pay this money, business. You're going to owe the money.
Man.
You can either give it to the state or you can give it to a crisis pregnancy
That's a good
center.
analogy. I hope they're listening along with my son right now.
Yes, they need to. Well, they're 31 now, and that's not my problem anymore. Their wives can fool with that.
I agree. Okay, well, those are all, I think, promising. All right, what about the citizen ballot initiative? Are we going to try that again?
Well, we did last year. The House passed a plan that pretty much mirrored what the previous plan was.
Yeah.
As you know, the Supreme Court struck down that mechanism because it had 5 congressional districts in the bill, which are in the Constitution, which we no longer have. And the plan that we passed last year basically said any initiative that is passed by the citizens will go into the statute, not the Constitution,
right?
Which is a better place for it. It's the citizens passing a law rather than the legislature passing a law, but still it's a law that needs to have the flexibility of the statute. And we changed the wording to, rather than saying 5 congressional districts, to simply say however how many districts we got. If it's 4, if it's 3, whatever. So that was pretty much our bill. There is a threshold in the law that I think it's 12% of those who voted in the last governor's race, I think is what it said. Maybe it's presidential race. We retained that. The Senate wanted a higher threshold, and that's kind of where the negotiations or discussions fell apart. So I anticipate those we will pick up from where we left off, that there will be some agreement reached, that there will be a threshold decided upon. I don't know where that's going to be, somewhere between the 2 points that we left off last time.
It's something that I get a lot of feedback on, certainly here.
Right.
And in my role, it's something that I think a lot of people feel like should have gotten done and didn't,
Right.
and now they're left with no opportunity to put something on a measure
Right.
on the ballot that they can vote on.
We have said for some time now that we felt like that was an important right of the citizens to have that opportunity. And as I said, the House passed a plan last year. The negotiations fell apart, but we'll probably renew those discussions this year.
Good to see you, and I'm sure we'll be talking more, and good luck on a productive session.
Thank you so much. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Coming right back with more in the Element